this video, we're going to create a paint coating effect in Blender that you can use for your product videos. I see this being used mainly in scenarios where a company is releasing a new flavor or product and their old product transforms into it. If you'd rather just download the project files, I'll put that up on Patreon. But if you just want to learn how to make it yourself, I'll take you through that step by step right now. I'm also going to walk you through how I did this animation, but I'll put timestamps below if you want to jump straight to the paint coating effect, which is fairly simple. First, let's go ahead and delete all this, and I'm going to bring in my soda can. You can use whatever can or product you want. If you want the exact can I use, I'll put that up on Patreon as well. So here is the prime can. I'm going to add an empty to it and start animating it. I like to just keep the animation on empty usually, just in case I need to add more nuanced animation or maybe like secondary animation to the can. I can do that without ruining the foundation of the animation, which I'm going to be putting on the empty here. So I'm going to call this empty can and then parent the can to the empty. Don't forget to save your project. I use a free camera rig add-on called Add Camera Rigs. It's on extensions.blender.org. I will link that in the description. And then I'm going to go to Shift A, add a camera, and do the dolly camera rig. And I'm going to shrink that to 0.3 just so it's closer in size to our can. I'm going to move the camera and the focal point kind of like to the can, like that. And let's move it this way. Let's go to about frame 36, keyframe the rotation, and keyframe the y-axis location. Next, let's split our window, and from this side, we're going to show the camera view, and we'll go to keyframe number 1, and we'll bring this back by about a meter and insert a keyframe. I'm also going to change the rotation to about -400 on the x-axis and -43 on the y-axis. Next, I'm going to bring this window up and create or change the window to our graph editor and switch this to normalize. And let's see what we're getting. So we've got a good little spin right there. What we want to do is we want this to bounce forward a little bit and then settle back. So one way I like to do that is selecting the curves and pressing Control or Shift E and then changing extrapolation to linear. And then you automatically get these keyframes going forward past where you originally set them. So I'm going to move this forward by about there and then set our keyframes again. And then I can move this keyframe back to let's try 18, and then let's do one more keyframe where it settles, or I guess bounces backwards. So I'm going to keyframe this, and let's move it to frame 28. And then now that we've got those bouncing keyframes, we can change our interpolation or extrapolation back to constant. And let me just play this through. So we've got the start of a good little animation. I'm going to remove the slowing or easing in of our first keyframe by changing our pivot point to individual cursors and then using my S key to scale this to 0. I'm going to change the easing in of this keyframe to about this. And let's see. Maybe move these in a little bit more. I think the first bounce here might be a little bit much, so I'm going to move this down a little bit and move this down a little bit. And just going to continue adjusting these, kind of eyeballing it until I get what I want. I'm going to change my focal length to 35 and go into pose mode of my camera rig and bring this in a little bit more to, let's say, about there. Next thing I'm going to do is animate the camera, so I'm going to have it move from this position to close up and moving upward, and then back to its original spot. So I'm going to set the keyframes for this guy and this guy. You can just hit I on your keyboard and that will create the keyframes for you. Let's move those keyframes to about 30, and then the next one, let's get this into position here. So I'm going to keep it on this axis and use our parent object right here to control the rotation. So let me just get it into position. If I open my right hand panel here and check out the camera rig, I can change the clip start to be 0.01, and then we won't get that clipping on the can. So I just gotta get it in the correct framing that I want. And let's keyframe that. I'm gonna go back to frame 30 and select the rig parent here, and then go to my rotation on it, insert a single keyframe. I want it to go all the way around the can, so I'm just gonna move it to about 360, maybe even a little bit more. Let's say 406, and insert that keyframe. And then let's go to the end here and move it back to, we'll say 350, maybe 340. But let me go to frame 56, and I'm gonna set the Z location of my parent camera rig, and then we're gonna go to about here and move this guy up just about there, I'd say. Insert another keyframe. Now select the camera bone and the focus bone again and hit I, and we're going to bring them back to their original location. So we can just copy these, but they are a little bit too high at this point since we raised our parent rig bone. So we can just bring that back down by moving it along the Z axis, and I'm going to move it down and then hit I again. Now let's just play through this and see what we're getting. It's a decent start. We can just adjust the keyframes here. Let's maybe take these keyframes on the camera, and we're going to increase the easing. That's pretty good. Let's go to the parent bone, and I don't think we need the easing on the moving upward. Yeah, I think it looks good without it. Let me increase the easing on the rotation though. Let me select these two bones again, and I want to increase that easing on the secondary, or that last movement where it goes back to its original spot. And when it's going back, I want the spin on the can to go back faster. So let me select the parent and move this keyframe over a little bit. Create a new keyframe. Bring this down. And let me see. I think that's good. I'm going to add one more keyframe on the camera that has it zoom out subtly at the end. That should be good. And we don't need an easing out there, so I'm going to remove that. Don't forget to save your project. Alright, now let's move on to the material side of things. So select the can and make sure you're in object mode so the can gets selected. Let's bring these over, duplicate them. You can change this one to the other color that you want the paint coating effect to end up as, and we'll mix these with a mix shader just like this. Go into your material and make sure that your displacement is set to displacement and bump. Mine's already set that way because I was already using this material earlier, but yours is probably only set to displacement, I think. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow Blender to physically change the geometry of your can rather than just the bump. It'll probably be defaulted to bump only, actually. I don't know for sure if this works in Eevee. I don't think it does, but we're going to use cycles anyways. Yeah, I think it only works in cycles because what we need is a subdivision modifier on our object, and we need this checked, adaptive subdivision. And when this is set to Eevee, I don't think that's there. Yeah. So we're going to set this to cycles and make sure adaptive subdivision is on. And we're going to add a few nodes to our shader now. Let's add a texture coordinate. And we're going to use the object output, but we also need a empty that's going to be driving that. So I'm going to create a empty here. Let's do arrows since we already have a bunch of objects. I'm going to hide my camera rig here. I'm going to scale this empty down to 0.1 and move it to the side for now. Let's call it coating effect. Select your can. In the texture coordinate node, select the coating effect object, and from the object output, let's create a length node and then a map range node, and let's change the values to be 2 and 3. Plug this into a greater than node and change the threshold to 0, and plug this into the factor. And now you'll see when we move our empty up, our coating changes from pink to blue. But we have a couple more things to do here. We want to create some variation in this line so it's not just kind of a straight line. So before going into our length node, we will have a noise texture, and we're going to set this to a scale of 1. We'll set this to 4D, and we're going to mix this with a mix vector. Change this to vector, and we're going to mix it with this one. Plug that in. And Now you'll see there's a little bit of variation in that line. Next, let's plug this map range into a noise texture, and this is going to drive our displacement. So plug that into a displacement node and plug that into our displacement output. Now we're getting that displacement, but we still need to change a few things. Change our scale to 3.4 and our detail to 0. And I want to move down this displacement so that it's happening over our line here. And I think the best way to do that, copy this map range node and add a subtract math node right here. So we're going to subtract this length into the map range and use that. And let's subtract negative 0.75. And now you'll see the main bump is happening over that line. And so now when we keyframe the coding effect empty, we get that cool bumpiness over the coding effect. Next, I'm going to change the mid-level on the displacement node to 0.4 so that it sticks out a little bit more. And we can parent our coding effect to the can empty so that it doesn't freak out when it flips in at the beginning. So I'm going to parent that, and let's start keyframing it. I'm going to set a keyframe here at the beginning, and when it zooms in, I'm going to keyframe it to about here, and when it's just about at the top, I want it to almost finish here, so about there. And when it's zooming out, I want it to complete its full path to about there. Keyframe it again, and let's play through it. So here in the middle, we're not really seeing that coding, so I'm going to bring it up and keyframe it again. And that's pretty good. I'm going to bring this up a little bit more at the beginning. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I guess the final thing to do is just tweak the lighting of the scene. I'm going to find a HDR that I like. Let me switch to world, and I'm going to turn off the transparency, or turn on the transparency. I'm going to add a hue saturation node and take away the saturation of the HDR. I'm going to add a curves node, and I'm going to tweak the blacks to be a little bit brighter. I'm going to bring up the overall strength. I'm going to change the color management to aces just because I like the saturation on the can color a little bit more. I'm going to go over to the compositor, create a new composite node setup. Let's add a alpha over, and let's just have a white background. Let me turn on the compositor in the viewport and set the background to white. I'm going to increase the value to 2 just so it is a brighter white. I want to keep this nice saturation on the can color, but I want to just have some white feathering along the edges of the can, just to make it feel like it's more integrated into this white background. So I'm going to try to take the alpha of our render layer. So I'm blurring the alpha of our can and then mixing that with a white node. And then I'm using that as a factor for another alpha over node. And what that does is it allows us to control kind of like the haze on the edge of our can. So I'm going to set that to 0.85, I think. And that should give us a kind of like a consistent haze on the edge of our can. Another thing you can do related to the paint coating effect that I forgot to mention is you can keyframe this W value, and that will further animate the waves on the effect. I found that you don't really need this, at least in my example, because as it moves up, it looks like it's moving regardless. But if you feel like your waves are too stationary or you want to add some extra life into them, you can also keyframe this W value in the noise texture. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure you subscribe. I'm trying to get this channel monetized soon. And comment below other tutorial ideas you might have for me. I think on this channel I'll probably focus mostly on product video related tutorials, but any tutorial ideas you have for me, feel free to drop them below in the comments. And yeah, thanks for watching.